and welcome back to the third segment of a four-part series on surviving and thriving through COVID-19. Hello, I'm Paula Hohenadel, and I'm from ASCY, and I'm here at the Professional Learning Library to host the third session of our series with Dr. Jean Clinton. As you know, Dr. Jean is a clinical professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavior Neurosciences at McMaster University, Division of Child Psychiatry, and also a well-known advocate for children's well-being and social-emotional development. Welcome back, Dr. Jean.
Hi, it's great to be here, Paula. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
As I am. In the last session, we began to speak about resiliency. And what does it mean to be resilient, and how resiliency will help us to thrive during this pandemic?
Right, yeah. So, I think if we were to have conversations with parents and educators, I think what we would hear from them, their wish for kids, is that they would manage to cope with the challenges and come out just fine. And that in fact is what resiliency is. It's the ability to cope and deal with adversity in whatever form it takes, be able to access resources to help you with that, and come back at least as good, if not better, than before. There's some really great people who have been writing about this. Dan Siegel talks about the yes brain. Michael Ungar has written a number of books all about resiliency that we can talk a bit more deeply about. And there's a very good analogy that's drawn by the Alberta Family Wellness Initiative, where they talk about resiliency is like life on a teeter-totter, with in the middle it's called a fulcrum, but the base that is if it's in the middle and something comes along and weighs down on one side, what do you have to muster to bring in your relationships, a routine, to make that fulcrum come back so that you're back to a normal range? And what they talk about is that some kids have got the fulcrum up at one end, where they've got tons and tons of positive things happening in their life. So when something comes along and weighs down on the one end, whoa, they've got lots of stuff that can balance it off. But the kids that we worry about are the kids where that fulcrum is down at the far end, where they're living in poverty, where there's maltreatment, where there's mental illness seriously in the parents. And we worry about those kids. But what we know is that we can, as community, build up and connect in with those kids and families and shift that fulcrum along. So resiliency is about the ability to do well in the face of adversity.
Thank you, Dr. Jean. That's a great analogy on the fulcrum. What do you feel are some of the barriers that get in the way of resiliency?
Well, I think there are, it's a great question. And I think that what we know is that our mindset, how we approach challenge, has a whole lot to do with whether we are able to access those resilience skills. So it means that you have to have a full awareness, a reflective ability to know, how am I feeling about this? Resilience is all about developing the ability to be reflective and say, what do I have control over? What do I not have control over? And it's interesting because we run into challenges in our, take for example, we've got all of these really challenging, urgent things that we need to attend to, and we kind of lose sight of what's important. Stephen Covey calls this the tyranny of the urgent. And so we need to be reflective and say, well, I'm getting all of these pressures to cover all of this curriculum that they've sent home for me. But what's really important to me is to spend time and be with my kids. That's a resiliency move. That's a resiliency way of thinking. And, we see this in early childhood as well. And, I'm wondering, Paula, you've been very involved in the RERO, the Reaching In, Reaching Out curriculum, the early childhood educators have been involved in. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about that and how you see the parallels between what I'm saying?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Jean. I think that's a great training to bring up at this time. It's the RERO stands for the Reaching In, Reaching Out resiliency training that looks at how we can reach in to develop some skills to support our own resiliency so that we can reach out to opportunities. And also developing our own skill set will help us to model those skills to children that we are, to the children in our lives, in our programs, and those in our families. So I think it's a great opportunity to help us to reflect on what our thoughts are, because I really feel that how we think about things impact the way we act. So the think, feel, act that you have mentioned before, also on the how resiliency does help us to reflect, to pause, and to respond in a resilient way.
Yeah, well, as I think about, and we'll be talking about this in another segment, but when I think about how are we going to bring kids back into childcare settings, I think that this thinking about through a resilience lens is so important, to be thinking about, what you think affects how you feel, affects how you act. So if you're driven by what I think is I need to get things back to normal as soon as possible, then how you're going to feel and how you're going to act is in one way. Whereas if you're thinking about the kids' resilience, if you're saying what I think is we really need to slow down and take our time, meet the kids where they are, be with them, not losing sight of what really matters, that tyranny of the important we want to be focusing on, then it changes the process. And also being reflective, it gives you the chance to say, well, who are the other people in this child's life who can help make this transition a whole lot easier? So that's that reaching in as well as reaching out.
Absolutely. Thank you. That is a great way to re-enter. As you say, we're going to discuss that further in the further segment. Mm-hmm. However, it is important to focus on the relationships and the relationships that we have with the children, and to start there as a starting point or entry point when we go back into our programs. And it's a key place to build on that, as you say, so that we can reconnect with them and their families. So, so as we move into what I'm thinking about when you talk about reflection, and it makes me think about joy, and finding the joy that we have when we do work with the children, and how that brings us back to the ideas of the educators of Reggio Emilia, which have inspired many of us in Ontario, in our Ontario context. And it lends me to think about their founder, Loris Malaguzzi, and when he says, "Nothing without joy." Could you speak a little bit about how we can focus on joy at this time?
Oh, wow. Paula, what a beautiful question. I think, to some, it might be, what do you mean talking about joy when I'm in the midst of survival mode? What we know is that if you are able to do what we've been talking about, Paula, and that is be able to step back from the tyranny of the immediate and look at, well, what am I grateful for? What in this present moment is actually magnificent? What in this present moment, even though there may be chaos going around, look at how my little one is getting so much pleasure from playing in that basin of water. What we know is that you need to have a mindset and an openness to receive that joy, to be perceiving it. There's a phrase from, I think it was Louis Pasteur, who said that chance favors the prepared mind. And so I think the same is true, that joy favors the prepared mind. You will see it when you believe that it's possible. And so I think in these challenging times, we need to be thinking about gratefulness, about gratitude, and making sure that we're open to seeing the possibility of what kids are capable of doing, what competencies they do have, and then that feeling of joy can imbue what we do. And by the way, it changes our neurotransmitters. We get more dopamine reward neurotransmitters in great parts of the brain, being my usual brain geek. So I love that, nothing without joy. It's a beautiful mantra to have.
Thank you. I think it is. You're absolutely right. And I believe that that touches on being present with the children so that we can receive them and see what is probably what values are really important to us during this time. And just to be open to have an open mind and be open to that receptivity. So what do you think is the barriers to this type of receptivity or this way of being with children?
Well, I think a huge barrier is our mindset. If we're taken up with, we have to get this done in the program, we have to follow this rule, we have to be compliant in this area. If we're all taken up with that tyranny of the urgent, then our minds aren't open to that receptivity of what the child is capable of. And so when do we see that we are open to joy most of all? And it's when our needs, values, goals, and strengths are in alignment with what's going on around you, that what's important to you, you're actually doing. What you need to be doing, you're actually doing. What you think is important, you're actually doing. And so when you've got those needs, values, goals in alignment, then you are creating what my friend Stephen de Groot talks about as the 3 great states, where you and your kids that you're looking after, whether your own or those in your program, that they are feeling safe, that emotionally, psychologically, physically, they're feeling safe, they're feeling significant. That means that they feel valued and valuable, and they feel situated, that they have a purpose. And kids' purpose is to play, not to follow our rules that are changing the routine every 15 minutes, but to get deeply engaged in play. So, it really has a whole lot to do with what we know is in our How Does Learning Happen? That the 4 foundations of belonging, expression, well-being are core to understanding this. And if we truly think about them, then we're able to bring that lens of joyful learning into the encounters.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing up our Ontario document of How Does Learning Happen, as it might be a great way to start as we enter into our programs after this time. And it really resonates with you when you speak about this present, being in the present moment, on the view of the child and also the view of the educator and the families. So how we have to really hone in on those ideas and those images to support us as we move forward.
Great. Thanks, Paula.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this time, Dr. Jean Clinton. As we conclude this session, I'd like to invite you to take a few minutes to jot down 2 or 3 things that resonated with you during our conversation today, and take the time to perhaps reflect on some things that perhaps you'd like to investigate further, or some things that you would commit to more so, or approach differently with children and families. I invite you to visit the ASCY website, where you can download a template, a reflective template, where you can jot down these ideas and these questions that you could follow up with at a live Q&A session with Dr. Jean later this time, at a later time. So again, thank you, Dr. Jean Clinton, for joining us today. Always appreciate our conversations, and to everyone, stay healthy and stay connected. Thank you.